This man printed $100 million. It wasn't fake, it was legal, and it almost destroyed an entire country. In 1924, a man named Artur Reis managed to steal $100 million. But he didn't rob a bank, and he didn't use a single counterfeit bill. In fact, the money he spent was printed by the official government mint, using the official plates, on the official paper. It was, for all intents and purposes, real money, but the government didn't know they were printing it for him. This is the story of how one man exploited a glitch in the global banking system to print himself into a fortune, and ended up accidentally triggering a revolution that would change his country forever. Most counterfeiters work in basements. Cheap ink, cheap paper. They get caught because the money feels wrong, the texture off, the color slightly dead. Artur Alves Reis had a different theory. Don't fake the money. Get someone else to make the real thing for you. In 1924, he walked into Waterloo & Sons, the official government-contracted printers of the Bank of Portugal's currency, and he left with 200,000 banknotes, each worth 500 escudos. Total value approximately 100 million escudos, roughly 1% of Portugal's entire GDP. He didn't pick a lock, he didn't hack a system, he exploited something far more fragile, the assumption that a piece of paper with the right signatures must be legitimate. This is the story of the most audacious financial crime in modern history, and of the flaw at the heart of how money actually works.
Born Lisbon, 1896, Alves Reis was not, by any measure, a genius. He was a dropout, he was impulsive, he was a liar with an extraordinary gift for making lies feel bureaucratically legitimate. His first major fraud was a forged engineering diploma from Oxford, a university he had never attended, in a country he had barely visited. It worked. He used it to land a senior position overseeing railway infrastructure in Angola. In Angola, he escalated a series of forged checks, a shell company, a brazen attempt to pocket funds meant for colonial infrastructure. He got caught, extradited, and thrown into a Lisbon jail in 1924. Picture the cell. Small, damp, a single barred window. Most people in that situation count days. Alves Reis studied bylaws. He got hold of the Bank of Portugal's founding charter and its governance documents. He read them the way a safecracker reads a manual, not for understanding, but for weakness. And he found three. First, the Bank of Portugal was semi-private. It had shareholders. It was not a pure arm of the state. That meant its internal decisions were not always subject to government scrutiny. Second, the bank was already quietly printing money to cover government deficits, a common but politically embarrassing practice. Secrecy was baked into how it operated. Third, and this is the one that cracked everything open, the bank had no centralized registry to track serial numbers across print runs. If two notes shared a number, no one would know unless they were placed side by side.
The entire security apparatus of Portuguese currency rested on the assumption that no one would ever print a second batch. Alves Reis was going to print a second batch. Here is where the plan becomes almost impossible to believe, not because it was technically brilliant, but because it was so nakedly simple. Reis had in his pocket several genuine 500 escudo notes. He used them to trace the signature of the Bank of Portugal's governor. Not a sophisticated reproduction, just careful, patient tracing. He then forged a multi-page contract authorizing a confidential print run of 200,000 notes, ostensibly to stabilize Angola's colonial economy. He recruited a Dutch trader named Karel Marang, smooth, well-dressed, persuasive, to be the face of the operation. Reis could not go himself. He was on bail. Marang arrived at Waterloo & Sons in London, presenting himself as a financial envoy. He produced the contract. He cited the extreme political sensitivity of the Angola mission. He explained with great seriousness that any direct contact with the Bank of Portugal would risk compromising the entire operation. One of the senior clerks paused. Something felt unusual about the chain of authorization. A foreign intermediary, an unusual request for secrecy. He noted his hesitation in an internal memo. He was overruled. The signatures checked out because they had been traced from real notes. The paper they specified was the Bank of Portugal's own stock. The contract looked like every other government contract Waterloo had ever fulfilled. And the secrecy clause did exactly what Reis designed it to do. It made calling the bank to verify seem like a breach of protocol. Waterloo & Sons took the original plates off the shelf, loaded the original paper, mixed the original ink, and printed 200,500 escudo notes for a convicted criminal on bail in Lisbon. The notes were legal, the authorization was not, and no one, at any point, picked up a telephone. The notes arrived in Lisbon in diplomatic pouches, suitcases of crisp, legitimate currency, untraceable, officially printed. The question now was not whether the money was real, it was how to spend 100 million escudos without triggering an investigation. Reis's answer was elegant. Don't spend it. Institutionalize it. He founded the Banco de Angola e Metrópole, a real bank with real offices, real staff, and real services. He offered low-interest loans to people who had never had access to credit. He was genuinely popular. He bought palaces, fleets of cars, jewels for his wife. He presented himself not as a criminal, but as a visionary financier. But Reis was not satisfied with spending the money. He wanted to control the source of it. He began purchasing shares in the Bank of Portugal itself. His logic was almost elegant in its audacity. If he owned the central bank, he could retroactively authorize the print run, destroy the evidence, and convert his fraud into monetary policy. By 1925, he held nearly a third of the bank's outstanding shares. He was weeks, perhaps days, away from a controlling stake. It ended with a money changer in Porto, not a detective, not a regulator, an ordinary man sitting behind a counter who noticed that 2 notes in his till had the same serial number. He flagged it to the Bank of Portugal. They assumed it was sophisticated counterfeiting. Forensic experts were brought in. The ink was tested. The paper was tested. The engraving was analyzed under magnification. Everything was authentic. Every single security feature was genuine. The investigators were baffled until someone thought to call Waterloo and Sons. On December 4, 1925, police raided the Banco de Angola e Metrópole. They found warehouses of cash. They found the correspondence. They found Carrel meringue. The fallout was not merely financial. When news broke, confidence in the escudo collapsed. Banks saw runs. Businesses couldn't price goods. No one knew what the currency was worth if duplicate notes were in circulation. Portugal, already politically fragile, was thrown into constitutional crisis. 6 months later, in May 1926, a military coup toppled the government. The humiliation of the rice scandal had fatally destabilized the republic. Antonio de Oliveira Salazar would eventually consolidate power from that coup. His Estado Novo regime would last until 1974, 48 years of authoritarian rule, with a direct line, if you trace it, to 2 notes in a money changer's till. One man's fraud, one country's future, changed by a serial number. Alves Reis was sentenced to 20 years. He served most of it. In interviews from prison, he showed no contrition, only a kind of philosophical detachment. I didn't steal. The Bank of Portugal was already increasing the money supply to cover government debts. I simply did the same thing, outside the authorized channels. He was not entirely wrong. The mechanism he exploited, money as a printed promise rather than a stored value, was the same mechanism that every central bank uses. He just removed the middleman. The Bank of Portugal sued Waterloo and Sons in one of the most scrutinized commercial trials of the century. After years of litigation, Waterloo was ordered to pay close to £600,000 in damages, a sum that, combined with reputational ruin, effectively ended the firm. They were eventually absorbed and dissolved. The clerk who had raised doubts, been overruled, and noted his concerns in a memo, his memo became the central exhibit. What Alves Reis proved is something economists and central bankers know but rarely say out loud. Money has no intrinsic value. Its entire authority rests on a shared agreement that the institution printing it is the only one allowed to do so. He found the one point in the chain where that agreement depended entirely on trust, and he exploited it with a forged contract and a borrowed pen. He didn't need to break into the vault. He became the vault.
If you found a duplicate banknote in your wallet today, would you report it or spend it? Subscribe if you want more stories about the moments when systems break and the people who found the crack before anyone else did.